When my daughter-in-law told me I couldn't see my grandchild anymore, I didn't cry. I smiled. Not because I was strong. Not because it didn't hurt. But because sometimes, when your heart breaks too suddenly, your body chooses silence instead. I remember standing there in her kitchen, my hands folded neatly in front of me, listening as she spoke. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost rehearsed. She didn't raise it. She didn't accuse me of anything directly. She just said it would be better this way. Better for who, she didn't say. I nodded. I said I understood. I thanked her for being honest. And then I walked out the door with my back straight, and my heart shaking inside my chest. That was the moment my life quietly changed. My name is Margaret. I am a grandmother, or at least I was allowed to be one once. I had imagined this part of my life for years. The rocking chair, the small shoes by the door, the feeling of a little hand wrapped around my finger. I imagined laughter filling the house again after the long, quiet years of raising my son alone. Daniel is my only child. I raised him the best I could, not perfectly, but with love, with patience, with the belief that kindness mattered more than control. When he grew up, moved away, and started his own life, I learned how to miss him without burdening him. I told myself that was what good parents did. So when he told me he was going to be a father, my heart felt full again. Like a light had been turned back on. I remember the first time I held my grandson. He was so small, so quiet. His fingers curled around mine as if he already knew me. I whispered his name like a promise. Oliver. In that moment, I felt useful again, needed, connected. I didn't realize then how fragile that feeling would be. Emily came into Daniel's life quickly. She was confident, organized, certain of her opinions. She liked things done her way, and she liked clarity. At first, I admired that. She loved my son. She took care of him. She built a home with him that looked stable and clean and well-planned. I never wanted to interfere. I told myself, this is their family now. My role is to support, not to lead. So I stayed careful. I asked before visiting. I brought meals only when invited. I kept my advice to myself unless it was requested. I thought that would be enough. I was wrong. The changes happened slowly. At first, they were so small I doubted myself. Emily would correct me in front of Daniel. That's not how we do it. She would take Oliver from my arms a little too quickly. He needs his nap. She would smile when she said these things, but her eyes stayed sharp, watchful. I told myself she was just a new mother, protective, tired. I remembered how overwhelming those early years could be. So I let it go. Again and again. But over time, I felt myself shrinking. I spoke less. I asked fewer questions. I watched more than I touched. I loved my grandson quietly, from the edge of the room. And I told myself that love did not need permission, even when it felt like it did. Daniel noticed, I think. Sometimes he would catch my eye and give me a small smile, like he was trying to reassure me without saying anything out loud. But he was tired too. Work, marriage, parenthood. I did not want to be another weight on his shoulders. So I stayed quiet. The day everything changed did not feel dramatic at first. It was an ordinary afternoon. I had come over to drop off a small gift for Oliver, a book I remembered reading to Daniel when he was little. Emily thanked me politely. She set the book aside without looking at it. We stood in the kitchen, the sound of the dishwasher humming between us. Then she said it. I think it's best if we take some space. She explained that boundaries were important, that she felt overwhelmed, that Oliver needed consistency. She said it wasn't personal. It always is. I asked one question. Will I still be able to see him? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. When I got home that day, I sat in my car for a long time before going inside. My house felt too big, too quiet. I walked past the room I had prepared for Oliver, the toys neatly arranged, the little blanket folded just right. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself cry. Not loudly, just enough to breathe again. What surprised me most was not the pain. It was the shame. I felt embarrassed for wanting too much, for hopping, for believing that love alone was enough to keep a place in someone's life. I wondered what I had done wrong. I replayed conversations, looked for mistakes, counted every moment I might have crossed a line without realizing it. That kind of thinking can hollow a person out. Days passed without calls. Then weeks. I tried not to reach out too often. I did not want to seem desperate. I did not want to confirm any fears Emily might have had about me being too much. So I waited. And waiting became a habit. I still set aside time for Oliver in my heart. I still cooked meals I would never serve. I still paused when I saw children his age in the grocery store. Grief does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits with you quietly, asking to be noticed. One night, Daniel called. His voice sounded tired. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. That was all. And somehow, it was both everything and not enough. I did not tell him how broken I felt. I told him I understood. I told him I loved him. Because that is what mothers do, even when they are hurting. That was the beginning of the distance. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that grows when no one knows how to speak without causing more pain. And yet, even then, I still believed things would improve. I believed love would find a way back. I just didn't know how much it would cost me before it did. Distance does not arrive all at once. It comes quietly. In missed calls. In short replies. In conversations that feel careful instead of warm. After Daniel's apology, I expected something to change. Not everything, just something. A visit, a phone call, a sign that the door had not fully closed. Instead, life continued without me. Days passed, then weeks. I marked time by ordinary things: laundry, groceries, the sound of the clock in the kitchen. I kept my phone close even when I went to bed just in case. No message came. I told myself not to read into it. I reminded myself that young families are busy, that new routines take time, that space does not always mean rejection. But deep down, I felt the shift. I was no longer part of the rhythm of their lives. When I finally did see them again, it was brief and awkward. Daniel invited me to a birthday gathering for a distant relative. It was easier, I think, than inviting me into their home. Neutral ground, other people around. Emily greeted me politely. She hugged me quickly, like someone checking off a box. Oliver stayed close to her side at first. He looked at me like he was trying to remember something important, but couldn't quite place it. That hurt more than anything else. Children do not hold grudges. They simply adapt. When I knelt down and said his name, his face lit up slowly, like a light turning on. "Grandma," he said. One word. But it felt like oxygen. I did not hold him long. I did not want to seem eager. I did not want to make Emily uncomfortable. So I sat back, I watched. I learned how to love from a distance. After that day, I expected more contact. There was none. When I reached out, the replies were polite but short. "We're busy right now. Another time. Let's see." That phrase stayed with me. Let's see. It sounded like hope, but it never led anywhere. I began to question myself in quiet moments. Had I overstepped without knowing it? Had my presence felt like pressure? Had my love felt like control? I replayed everything. The advice I gave when Daniel was younger. The times I mentioned how we did things back then. The small moments where I might have assumed a role that was no longer mine. None of it felt harmful. But harm is not always intentional. Emily and I never spoke openly about what she felt. That silence became its own kind of conflict. I sensed her discomfort even when she was kind, her tension even when she smiled. She watched me closely when I was near Oliver. I felt like I was being evaluated. And slowly, I became smaller. Daniel stood in the middle. I could see it in his eyes when we spoke, the tired look, the careful tone. He wanted peace. But peace often comes at a cost. And that cost, more often than not, was distance from me. One afternoon, I asked him directly, "Have I done something wrong?" He paused. "No," he said, "not wrong, just things are different now." Different. That word carries weight when you don't know what it means. I stopped asking questions after that. I focused on being agreeable, flexible, patient. I thought if I made myself easy enough, I would be allowed back in. I did not realize how much of myself I was giving up in the process. The visits, when they happened, were controlled. Short, supervised, scheduled. Emily was always nearby, always listening. I chose my words carefully. I avoided advice. I avoided opinions. I avoided anything that could be misunderstood. I spoke softly. I laughed gently. I loved quietly. But love that must hide eventually begins to ache. One day, during a visit, Oliver reached for me. Emily stepped in immediately. "He's fine," she said. "He needs to learn independence." I nodded. But inside, something cracked. Not because of what she said, but because of how natural it had become for her to keep us apart. That night, I went home and sat in the dark. I thought about how easily roles can be rewritten without consent. How quickly someone can go from being essential to optional. I wondered if this was what aging felt like. Not physical decline, but emotional displacement. I tried to talk to Daniel again. Not to complain. Not to accuse. Just to be honest. "I miss him," I said. "I know," he replied. But knowing did not change anything. The tension grew not through arguments, but through absence. Through unspoken rules. Through the quiet understanding that I was no longer central to their family story. I had become a supporting character. One evening, after weeks without a visit, I received a message. Emily wrote it. "We've decided it's best to pause visits for now." No explanation. No timeline. Just that sentence. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands trembled. I felt heat rise to my face, then fade. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself. Instead, I typed back, "I understand." It was a lie, but it was an easy one. That was the moment the distance became real. Not emotional. Practical. I was no longer part of Oliver's life. The days after that felt unreal. I woke up expecting to hear his voice in my memory. I walked past the park where we used to sit. I avoided the toy aisle at the store. Grief settled in quietly. Not dramatic. Just heavy. Daniel called less often. When he did, he sounded torn. "I'm trying to keep things calm," he said. I did not ask who the calm was for. I began to feel invisible. Not unwanted. Just unseen. And that is a different kind of pain. I wrote letters I never sent. I packed away toys I might never give. I stopped planning for a future that did not include me. That was the hardest part. Letting go of expectation. And yet, beneath all of it, something else grew. Not anger. Not resentment. But clarity. I started to see the situation without the haze of hope. I saw the imbalance. The silence. The quiet power of control. And I realized that love should not require permission to exist. I was still his grandmother. Even if no one acknowledged it. Even if no one needed it. That truth stayed with me. Waiting. And then came the moment that changed everything. The moment when the quiet distance turned into something undeniable. The moment that broke my heart in a way I could no longer ignore. The moment did not arrive loudly. There was no argument, No raised voices. No door slammed shut. It came in the form of a photograph. I was standing in line at the grocery store when I saw it. A woman in front of me was scrolling through her phone, smiling softly at something on the screen. I looked away at first, then back again without thinking. There he was. Oliver, wearing a small jacket I had never seen before, standing in front of a cake, candles lit, people gathered around him. A birthday I had not been invited to. A birthday I had not known about. I turned my face away quickly, embarrassed by the tears that rose without warning. I paid for my groceries with shaking hands and walked to my car slowly, as if moving too fast might make it worse. I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the engine to cool. Long enough for the truth to settle in. I had been erased. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. Not just the recent months, but years, conversations, choices, silences. I realized then that I had been waiting for permission to exist in my grandson's life. And permission had never come. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that did not lift. I made coffee I did not drink. I sat at the table and watched the light move across the floor. I thought about calling Daniel. I imagined his voice, his hesitation, his apologies. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Resolve. I wrote him a message. Not long. Not dramatic. Just honest. I saw pictures of Oliver's birthday. I didn't know it was happening. I need to understand where I stand. I stared at the message before sending it. Then I pressed the button. Hours passed. Then a reply came. We didn't think it would be a big deal. Emily wanted to keep it small. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just justification. I felt something inside me finally give way. Not in pieces. All at once. I called him. He answered after the second ring. Mom. I need you to listen, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. I have respected every boundary. I have stayed quiet. I have waited. And now I find out about my grandson's birthday from a stranger's phone. There was silence. Then he sighed. It's complicated. No, I said gently. It's not, it's painful. He did not argue. He did not interrupt. And that told me everything. I told him how invisible I felt. How small I had made myself. How much I missed Oliver. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I spoke like someone stating facts that could no longer be ignored. I'm not asking to control anything, I said. I'm asking not to be erased. There was a long pause. Then he said something I had not expected. I don't know how to fix this. That was the truth. And it was also the problem. After that call, something changed between us. Not dramatically, but clearly. The silence felt heavier, like a door that had been closed without slamming. Days later, Emily sent a message. I think it's best if we stop communicating directly for now. That was it. No explanation. No discussion. Just a decision. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down. I felt strangely calm, as if my body had already gone through all the pain it could handle. That evening, I packed away Oliver's things. Not angrily. Carefully. I folded the blanket. I placed the toys in a box. I labeled it and slid it into the closet. I did not know if I would ever take it out again. But I could not live with the constant reminder. I grieved then. Fully. Not just the loss of access, but the loss of identity. Being a grandmother had become a quiet part of who I was. And now, that part had no place to go. The weeks that followed were the hardest. No visits. No updates. No photos. Time moved forward without me. I began to notice how much of my emotional life had revolved around waiting. Waiting for calls. Waiting for invitations. Waiting for permission. And I realized something that surprised me. I was exhausted. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked older, but because I looked absent, like someone who had stepped out of her own life. That was when I made a quiet decision. I would stop waiting, not because I no longer cared, but because I could not survive that way anymore. I stopped checking my phone constantly. I filled my days intentionally. I walked in the mornings. I read again. I volunteered at a local library, reading stories to children whose grandparents were no longer around. It hurt at first. Then it healed something. Months passed. Not easily, but steadily. I began to feel like myself again. Not whole, but grounded. And then, unexpectedly, the door opened again. Daniel called. His voice sounded different. Tired. Humbled. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" He came over that evening. He looked older than I remembered. We sat at the kitchen table, just like we used to. "I should have done more," he said. "I should have spoken up sooner." I listened. Not with bitterness. With honesty. He told me things he had never said before. About the pressure. The arguments. The fear of losing his family if he pushed too hard. I understood more than he knew. But understanding does not erase hurt. "I don't want to lose you," he said quietly. I looked at him then, really looked at him. And I said something I had never said before. "I need to matter too." That was the turning point. Not the birthday. Not the messages. That sentence. Because from that moment on, something shifted. Not immediately. Not completely. But enough. Emily did not apologize. But she softened. The distance remained. But it loosened. Visits were discussed. Carefully. With conditions. I agreed to them. Not because I was desperate, but because I was steady. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to balance. Not peace, but possibility. The days after that conversation were still quiet, but the air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but less suffocating. The tension that had pressed down on me for months loosened, just enough that I could breathe without holding it in my chest. Daniel and I began to speak more openly. Not constantly, not in long, drawn-out talks, but enough that I knew he was present and listening. He shared small details about Oliver's days, the little milestones, and I listened without judgment. I did not demand more. I did not ask to be in the house when he learned to ride a tricycle or said his first sentence. I let the moments exist somewhere in the world, knowing that I would be part of them when I could. Sometimes that meant receiving a picture through a message. Sometimes it was a brief phone call. Sometimes it was nothing at all, and that was okay. Slowly, I realized that my love for Oliver did not need to be measured by how often I saw him. My love existed independently. That was a hard truth, but a liberating one. The first structured visit was like stepping into a different rhythm. Emily was nearby, carefully watching. Her gaze was alert, assessing, and I reminded myself that this was part of the process. I spoke gently, sat quietly, and let Oliver set the pace. He clung to me at first, his small body wary, like he remembered something but was unsure. I held him anyway. I whispered his name and told him how much I missed him. He relaxed after a while, and a small smile appeared on his face, just the one I had loved so dearly for months. It was enough. When it was time to leave, he looked up at me with wide, questioning eyes. "Why don't you come over anymore?" he asked softly. I looked at Emily, who looked away. I knelt down to his level and said gently, "Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out, but I will always love you." He nodded, accepting the explanation in the way only children do. And I drove home, tears slipping down my face. Not from anger, not from loss, but from the weight of reality. the cost of love measured by schedules and boundaries. Over the following months, the visits became more predictable. We learned the new rules, where I could sit, what I could say, when to arrive and leave. I followed them carefully because any friction might undo the fragile progress we were making. But I also began to see subtle changes. Emily relaxed slightly. She asked me about Oliver's interests. She let him spend a few extra minutes in my lap. Those small gestures were monumental to me. Daniel, too, began to find his footing. He no longer avoided my eyes. He spoke more candidly about the tension at home. He apologized when necessary, not to absolve guilt, but to acknowledge what I had endured. I listened, and sometimes I offered my own perspective gently, without anger or blame. I also began to reclaim pieces of myself that I had lost in the months of waiting. I reorganized my house in ways that grounded me rather than tethered me to the past. I moved Oliver's rocking chair to a corner, not because I no longer loved it, but because I wanted to make room for myself. I framed a picture of my own, my face smiling, alone, and placed it on the shelf. It was a small act of self-recognition, but it reminded me that I existed beyond the role of grandmother. I started volunteering at the local community center. I read to children whose grandparents were gone or far away. Their laughter and curiosity reminded me why patience and kindness mattered, and how love could extend beyond one family. I joined a book club and discovered conversations about life that were not tied to loss or grief. Slowly, I was filling my days with purpose that was mine alone. When Emily allowed a slightly longer visit, I noticed a subtle shift. She left the room for a few minutes, and Oliver crawled into my lap, whispering, "I missed you." My heart swelled quietly. No one interrupted us. No one scolded him. The moment was ours. That small trust rebuilt, one gentle gesture at a time. Another day, Emily asked if I could watch Oliver for an hour while she ran an errand. Just an hour. My heart raced with anticipation and fear. But I agreed calmly. That hour became a gift. Not because it solved every problem, but because it showed that trust could be rebuilt slowly, carefully, without demand or expectation. Daniel and I continued to meet occasionally on neutral ground. We watched sunsets together, sitting side by side in silence, letting the sky do what words could not. He spoke sometimes. I spoke sometimes. Mostly we listened. We shared memories of Oliver, of the past, of our own lives. I realized that loving him now meant trusting his journey, even if it was different from what I had imagined. And for Daniel, that trust meant learning to balance love for his mother and commitment to his family. He stumbled sometimes. He said the wrong thing or said nothing at all. But he tried. And I saw him grow, quietly and beautifully. The visits with Oliver became more relaxed over time. Not frequent, but meaningful. Each visit mattered. Each moment was intentional. I stopped rushing through them, fearing the ending. Instead, I focused on the middle. When he laughed, I listened. When he spoke, I leaned in. When he hugged me, I held him fully, without letting him sense the fear I had carried for months. Emily and I never became close. We never shared secrets or long talks, but we learned to coexist, to share space with respect, to allow love without suspicion. That was enough. I also learned an important lesson for myself. Love does not mean shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. It does not mean silencing your own heart. Love can coexist with boundaries. Love can be measured in presence, yes, but also in patience, resilience, and respect. I allowed myself to grieve the first steps I did not see, the words I did not hear, the moments that had passed while I waited. But I did not dwell in them. I mourned honestly and then moved forward with intention. Months later, a small miracle happened. Emily asked if I could watch Oliver while she ran a short errand. Just a few hours. My heart raced. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. She left, and I held him close. He looked at me and said softly, "Just us." "Yes," I replied, "just us." Those hours felt monumental. Not because they repaired all that had been broken, but because they proved that bridges, once burned or blocked, could be rebuilt in small, careful steps. Trust, I realized, does not return overnight, but it can return gently. Over time, the sharpness of absence faded. The ache remained, quiet but bearable. I learned that grief could coexist with gratitude. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and boundaries did not erase love. I built a life outside of waiting. I joined a book club. I volunteered. I laughed. I made my home my own sanctuary, no longer defined solely by absence or longing. And slowly, when Oliver called me Grandma or handed me a small drawing, I could feel gratitude instead of grief. Love, I discovered, does not need to be loud to be real. It can be measured in presence, intention, and respect. I stopped expecting everything to return to the way it had been. Some things were meant to move forward in a new shape. My relationship with Oliver became gentler, slower, more mindful. Every moment mattered. Every visit counted. I learned to be present for the middle rather than rushing toward the end. Emily and I never became friends, but we became civil. Daniel learned when to speak and when to step back, imperfectly but honestly. And I learned that I could love without disappearing. I could honor boundaries without sacrificing my heart. Some nights, I still feel the ache. Quietly, slowly, like a memory passing through. But it no longer controls me. I look around my home now and see life that is full. Not perfect, not complete, but honest. Strength and patience are visible where I once saw only loss. And most importantly, I see myself clearly again. A grandmother, a mother, a woman who loves deeply without losing herself. Love, I realize, does not need to close doors. It should make room. When I say goodbye to Oliver now, I kneel, look him in the eyes, and say softly, "I love you." He smiles and says it back. And that is enough. Saying goodbye to Oliver no longer felt like leaving a piece of myself behind. I had learned to carry him in my heart, even when we were apart. I had learned that love did not need constant affirmation to exist. It was patient. It was quiet. It was steady. One evening, after a visit, we lingered a little longer. The sun was soft, spilling gold across the living room floor. Oliver leaned against me, small and warm, and whispered, "Grandma, I drew this for you." I unfolded the paper and saw stick figures again, simple and imperfect. One figure had a smiling face and curly hair, labeled clearly, "Grandma." My chest tightened in a way that was both painful and joyful. Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. I wanted this moment to be just ours. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly. "It's beautiful." He beamed and ran off to play. I sat in the chair I had chosen for myself, alone but not lonely. I breathed in the quiet and realized something I had not understood before. The presence of love does not always require constant proximity. It can exist in memory, in intention, in patience, in every small act of care. Emily no longer hovered during visits. She listened more. She spoke more. Our conversations were short, sometimes awkward but civil. We learned to coexist in a shared space, respecting each other's roles without competing. It was not warmth exactly, but it was tolerance turning into cautious understanding. That, I realized, was enough. Daniel continued to grow in his role as father and husband. I saw him learning to navigate the delicate balance of protecting his marriage while honoring his mother. He stumbled. He apologized. He tried again. I watched, quietly proud, knowing that the lessons of kindness and patience I had tried to instill in him were still present, quietly guiding him. I also changed in ways I had not expected. I had spent months shrinking, silencing myself, waiting for approval to love my grandson. I had mourned deeply. I had felt invisible, and I had realized that love without self-respect is a quiet kind of suffering. So I reclaimed my space. I filled my days with purpose that did not depend on anyone else. I joined a book club and discovered conversations that sparked curiosity and joy. I volunteered at a community center, reading stories to children who needed care and attention. I laughed. I cooked for neighbors. I allowed myself small pleasures. Slowly, I felt a quiet strength returning. The sharpness of absence softened over time. The ache remained, not gone, but no longer controlling me. It was a reminder of the love I had carried, the lessons I had learned, and the resilience I had discovered in myself. Sometimes I still dream of Oliver as a baby, small and fragile in my arms, and I wake reaching for him. But then I remember the present, The boy who runs to me now, who draws pictures, who whispers his love freely. I have found a way to be part of his life without fear, without shrinking, without waiting for permission. Love, I finally understood, does not need to be earned by disappearing. Love is not measured in hours spent or in permissions granted. Love should make room. Love should allow for mistakes, for growth, for boundaries. Love can coexist with distance. Love can endure patience and understanding. I have learned to be present in this way, with intention, with care, with heart. I have learned to speak when necessary, to listen always, and to hold space without taking over. And I have learned that it is possible to love without losing oneself. Some nights when the house is quiet, I still feel the ache. It comes slowly, softly, like a shadow passing through. But it no longer weighs me down. It is a reminder, not a prison. I breathe. I remember. I give thanks for the moments I do have, no longer longing for the ones I cannot reclaim. Now, when I say goodbye to Oliver, I kneel to meet his gaze. I tell him I love him. He smiles. He tells me he loves me back, and that is enough, for today, for this moment, for the life we continue to share in our own imperfect, gentle, measured way. I am still a grandmother. I am still a mother. I am still a woman who has loved without conditions, even when it has cost me something. And I am finally at peace with the understanding that love is not about control. It is not about permission. It is about presence, resilience, and the quiet courage to keep giving, even when the outcome is uncertain. Some things do not return to the way they were, and they should not. They move forward into something new, something alive, something that allows all who are part of it to grow, even in imperfect ways. And so I live each day with intention, with love, and with the knowledge that the heart can bend, heal, and expand without breaking completely. The visits continue, small but meaningful. The moments are intentional. The love is present. And I am at last enough just as I am.